Hi, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how to discipline a disrespectful teenager. I teach all about parenting, good communication, and how to build strong family bonds all over the world, and I do this through the lens of the principle self-government. In this video, we're going to be looking through that lens of self-government as we anticipate how we can better discipline disrespectful teenagers. We're going to talk about what respect really does need to look like in the home from them and from us, and 5 things that we can do in order to create a more respectful environment. So let's talk about respect and what respect really means. There are people that come to me and they'll say, you know, Nicholeen, I think that I have 2 problems. And I'll say, okay, well, what are your problems? And they'll say, well, you know, my children don't respect me, but I think I also don't respect them. And I'll say, well, that's actually pretty common. Many parents are worried about having this environment of respect happen at home. Now, I know it's really obvious to see when the children are not respecting us, but it might not be quite so obvious to see how we might not be respecting them. And when I say this, I do not mean that these types of respect look the same, because they don't. In fact, respect for child looks very different than respect for adult. When people respect each other, this means that they understand who each other is and that they have a high regard for that person. So the opposite of respect or regard is to be indifferent to what that person is doing or saying. So when we're respecting our children or when they're respecting us, there should be a feeling of regard or even maybe kind of a reverence for that person and what their role is. So this brings me to the first point that we absolutely must talk about if we're going to help our children learn respect. Years ago, when people first started asking me to teach about parenting because I was on an episode of The World's Strictest Parents, I wrote this book, which is called Parenting a House United. Now, when I wrote this book, I assumed that people understood roles in the family. And I'm not talking about responsibilities. I'm talking about what types of roles people actually have in their relationships. So what's the role of mother? What's the role of father? What's the role of 15-year-old daughter? I thought people understood this, and this was a given, I guess just because how I was raised. Well, after a while of reading this book, people started asking me questions like, well, what if they don't really care about what you tell them they need to do? What if they don't want to do anything or they won't do anything? What if they're talking back all the time? What if they're totally disrespectful of you? And I would say, well, that's a roles issue. Now, of course, I give skills in Parenting a House United that people can use to help with the disrespect, and we are going to talk about some of those. But ultimately, underneath it all, if people don't know who each other is in the family, then they're not going to be very inspired to fall in line with the roles that they're supposed to have. So children are supposed to learn from their parents, and parents are supposed to be teachers. These are 2 key roles of parent and child. So after I realized that parents and children had a struggle understanding who each other was and keeping that straight in the family, then I wrote this book, which is called Roles: The Secret to Family, Business, and Social Success. This book is a book you actually can read with your teens, and you can discuss the roles that this family has. So this book is about a family, the Justice family. It's a case study where we see the parents and children struggling to get along with each other. The children are being disrespectful, and the parents are having a hard time pulling them away from digital devices and getting them to do something productive and actually show respect to them. So this story gives parents and their children or teens an opportunity to discuss those roles and what they should really look like. You see the Justice family get the roles in alignment, and then everything falls into place. Then they have the ability to actually implement the skills they really want to function better as a family. Did you know that when your roles are not in the right place, that is actually the recipe for dysfunction? Well, it is. When families are not functioning properly, it's usually because they've lost sight of who each other really is. Our roles give us identity in the family, and actually for life. The second tip that I have for you is planning. If you want your children to respect you more, they not only need to know who they are and you are so that they can honor that teacher-parent role that you have in the family, but they also need to know the direction everybody's headed as a group. Where are you going? What is the plan? So in my Teaching Self-Government course, I talk about creating a vision for the future. I call it a 20-year vision. You look ahead for your family and you create a plan for where you're headed as a group. This plan involves a feeling of connection that you have with each other, as well as some key principles that you're going to hold on to get there. Another part of the plan is planning how corrections will happen and what types of skills that a person might need to learn. For instance, in our family, we have this 20-year vision of a certain Christmas Eve party that we are going to have. Now, our family is kind of grown up now, and we are this close to achieving our 20-year vision, which we're super excited about. When my children have been getting married, moving on in life, they still want to hold on to that 20-year vision. In fact, they share the 20-year vision with the people that they're going to marry so that they can say, now listen, there's this party that our family is going to have, and we practice having it every year, and this is what we want to feel like as a family. This is what we want our relationships to be like as a family. Are you okay with that? Can you be part of that with us? So they bring them in to that family vision so that we can for sure keep focused on who we are as a group. Now, this doesn't mean they don't get their own autonomy, because they definitely do, especially after they've left the home. But this helps everybody stay focused on who they are as a group instead of just as an individual. Our world gives people plenty of opportunity to cater to self and selfish desires, but truly, character development is formed by caring about something greater than yourself, and that starts in the relationships of the family. So create a plan for where you're headed and what you're going to do to get there. Now let's talk about some of those skills that you need in order to accomplish that plan that you have for your family and for your relationship with your teenager. Before I get to the skills component of this video, click that subscribe button. There are so many great videos on this channel about relationships, and most of them will relate to teenagers. So even if it says toddler, I want you to know I always base everything on principles, and so if you are following the principles in any of these videos, it's going to strengthen your relationship, your bond, and the respect with your teenagers. Click the subscribe button now. I want to talk about skills, but I do remember that there's one other thing about planning that I forgot. And that is that when you are making a plan for the family, don't forget to also make individual plans for your relationships. So one thing that the parents do in the book Roles that I talked about earlier is they have an individual discussion with each of their older children. So this is your teenagers. They sit down with them and they say, what do you want our relationship to be like in the future, maybe 5 years from now? And the teens will share their perspective or what their hopes are for the relationship. Now, don't be thrown off if some of those hopes seem a little bit selfish, because that can happen to a person when they're in the teenage years. Then the parents share their hopes for that upcoming relationship that will maybe happen 5 years from now. Then they say, okay, so how are we going to get to that relationship? We both want to have freedom. We want to have understanding. We want to have good communication. We want to enjoy being with each other. We want to have respect in our relationship. So how are we going to get there? Well, that leads right into the skills. Years ago, I did treatment foster care for troubled teens. They were all between the ages of 12 and 18. This is actually how this whole teaching parenting and good communication thing even started for me. I had no idea I would do any of this. I was just taking in troubled teens, trying to help them, and at the same time providing a little extra income for my family when my husband went back to school. Little did I know that soon, really soon in fact, people would notice that these teens that came to my home were changing. Something was different about them. They came very tough and not wanting to make make any changes in their life, blaming everybody else for their problems. And before people knew it, these teens were acclimated to our family. They seemed very functional and purposeful. In fact, they were driven. They were excelling in school, strengthening relationships, and soon moving back home and repairing family bonds. People wanted to know how I was doing this. And I said, well, I'm teaching them the principles and skills of self-government. And they wanted to know what some of those principles and skills were. So this started this teaching journey for me that I thought would be very short-lived, but turned out to be a lifetime of work. So there are 4 basic skills that I taught every one of the youth that came to my home. We're talking day 1. And my children learned these 4 basic skills from the time they were little. But I'm telling you about my foster children so that you can know it's never too late to learn these skills. Adults need to learn them too. In fact, they're just adult skills. But you can teach them to your children at any time. So these 4 basic skills that I taught all the children that came to my home were following instructions. That's right, how to follow an instruction. Think of the times that you think they're not respecting you. It's usually when they're not lifting a finger to help, right? They need to know how to follow an instruction from you, but also from themselves, teachers, other people that need to give them instructions. There's 5 steps to that skill. Those 5 steps are to look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or disagree appropriately, do the task immediately, and then check back. That's how a person follows instructions. The second skill that I taught them was how to accept a no answer or criticism. It's the same skill set for both of those things. Disappointing things are going to happen. We don't get everything our way, and sometimes somebody has to tell us no and create a boundary for us, right? And at that time, we need to know how to accept those no answers and how to drop the subject and not hold on to bad feelings anymore. So there are 4 steps to the skill accepting no answers and criticism. The third skill that I taught the children was how to accept consequences. This is vital because a person can't learn self-mastery unless they acknowledge the consequences of their own actions and they choose to accept them. Teaching a person the 6-step process for how to accept consequences is not mean. It's actually something that's going to be liberating for them because now they can learn to course correct for the duration of their lives. And when they're not being respectful, what do you need to do? You need to correct them, right? And so they need to be ready to accept it. Now, what if they want to tell you something? You know how sometimes they talk back, they litigate, they tell you, no way, I don't care, because those are all disrespectful communications. Well, they need to be able to talk to us, but they need to be able to do it in a respectful way. So the 4th of the 4 basic skills that I teach the children is the skill disagreeing appropriately, or you could say disagreeing respectfully. So there are 7 steps to the skill disagreeing appropriately. And when you teach that skill to your children, they will learn how to talk to you in a way where you're ready to listen and where oftentimes they can even get their way. Because when a child chooses to disagree appropriately, a wise parent shows them that that skill works to get their way. It's much better than using attitude or disagreeing in ways that show that they don't respect their parent. The 4th tip that I have for you is consistent corrections. So in order to teach a person self-government, you have to teach cause and effect. And you need to do it with calmness and consistency. If you are going to correct the disrespect, you can't keep tolerating it. You've got to lower your tolerances and increase your correction interactions. But they don't need to be negative. They can still be hopeful, even though these are times where a child will earn a negative consequence. You've got to prepare them for what these corrections will be like so that they accept them every time. So you don't just teach the 4 basic skills, but you also teach them all the words that you will use for a correction. Now, I know there's some people who are thinking, oh, I correct my child, they totally don't care. That won't even work, Nicholeen. I mean, thanks for the suggestion, but no good. No, actually, there is something else I do, and it's called intensive teaching. This is another type of correction. So after you do a regular correction, if the child is not going to accept it, and they're going to continue to show disrespect to you, then there is something called an intensive teaching that I do, and this uses something called the rule of 3. We do this verbal process, and the child gets to make a bunch of choices that actually will end up shutting down a lot of their privileges and stuff if they choose not to be calm and communicate in an effective way. Really, when we're talking about disrespect, we're talking about non-effective communication. We need to teach our children how to communicate with us, right? That's why that disagree appropriately skill is going to be one they love. But when they go out of control or they don't accept corrections, we can very easily help them go through a process to get calm again, back in control, so that you can have good communication at that point. Which means that after people are corrected, make sure to follow it up with good communication. Tip number 5 is follow-up meetings. So not only are you going to follow up after you do a correction, but you want to make sure that you have a habit of having regular meetings with your child where you talk about goals, relationships, like your relationship and theirs, but also relationships with friends. You might talk about school things, church things, things that are part of the development of that child. When you have those types of really deliberate discussions, then the child has the opportunity to be held accountable for their behaviors and their thoughts. Have regular meetings. In our family, we do them every Sunday afternoon. This is meeting time at the Peck house, and my children actually look forward to these meetings because they like to feel themselves progress. They also like the one-on-one individual attention that they get when they have meetings with mom and dad. They also know that during these meetings, there's opportunity where they can always tell us things that they need from us, and that we will help them get the things they need and get the development opportunities that they require for success in life. They love these meetings. They make for great follow-through. There are so many more tidbits that I could share with you that will help you with your teenager and help you develop more respect. It usually just boils down to creating a system in the home, a type of communication where everybody understands because it's all predictable. We know the words that are going to be said. We know how we're going to solve the problems. We don't have to power struggle with each other anymore. This leads to increased respect, increased bonding, and better problem solving overall. I want to give you more of that so that you can have a greater connection with your teenage child, because really, if disrespect is happening, you know that you're actually having bonding or connection problems. I have a full class here on this channel that I would like to give you for free, and it is called The Not So Known Secret to Parenting Success. So click on that video now so that you can get additional help for your teen and your relationships with the entire family.